Hello everyone. Good evening. Can we all hear me?
Yes, sir, we can all hear you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining in and welcome to class. So we are going to be starting class. We are all welcome to week three rather of the JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program. Right. Sorry, we have gone through We have gone through 2 weeks already of the GC Mentorship and Internship program, and we are currently in week three. So, just to not waste our time, I'll be introducing our mentors just like we normally do. I will introduce our mentors. We'll take mentors presentation. We'll take mentors presentations. We'll take mentees presentations. We'll take feedback from mentors, and then we'll take questions and answer, and then we'll call it a day. So not to waste any time, just to quickly introduce our mentors for today. Today in class, we'll be having two mentors. The first being Miss Bernice Ofunre Asien. Miss Bernice Esquire is a visionary in the field of fashion law with a multifaceted legal background and a deep commitment to excellence, Ms. Asen has made significant strides in the fashion business. Her educational journey stands as a testament of her dedication to mastering her craft. Ms. Asen's passion for fashion law took her to the prestigious Milano Institute in Milan, Italy, where she honed her expertise as on an international stage. Rather, she has earned certifications in intellectual property law from the World Intellectual Property Organization and advanced intellectual property valuation on the intellectual property from the Intellectual Property Institute as the founder of the Cardinal Council, a leading fashion law firm in Lagos, Nigeria. Ms. Asian has consistently demonstrated innovation and excellence. Her diverse clientele includes fashion and creative brands, startup fashion technology companies, investors, models, and influencers. Her ability to navigate the intricate intersection of law and fashion has solidified her reputation as a trusted legal advisor within the industry. Ms. Asien's expertise encompasses various aspects of the fashion law, including intellectual property rights, contract negotiations, employment law, and more. Her profound understanding of legal frameworks ensure that her guidance and education are tailored specifically to the fashion industry. Additionally, Ms. Asien holds a certificate in tax law from the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. She is also a member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria and also an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators of the Nigerian Bar. Currently, she is in the final stage of completing an LLM at Backup University. Her commitment to advancing the field of fashion law is exemplified through her role as the founder of the Fashion Law Institute. This groundbreaking institution is dedicated to addressing the gaps in fashion law in Africa, advocating for legal reforms, fostering accountability, and conducting essential research within the African fashion industry. She actively participates as a speaker and facilitator at various fashion and creative industry events, training programs, workshops. Ms. Asien works continues to shape the future of fashion law in Africa and beyond. Thank you so much, Ms. Bernice. I think you're already on the call. We are so happy to have you with us in today's class. You are very much welcome. Our second mentor for today, her profile is quite lengthy. So I'll just try to read a bit of it. We have sent their profiles into your group so you can catch up where necessary. So our second mentor that we're expecting in class today is Miss Liz Lenjo. Miss Liz Lenjo advocates. Sorry. Okay, Miss. Sorry, I'm coming. Miss Liz Lenjo advocates of the High Court of Kenya, Commissioner of Oaths and Notary Public. Liz Lenjo is a founder and managing consultant at My IP Legal Studios. She specializes in intellectual property, entertainment, media, and fashion law. She is she is an immediate founder, member of the Copyright Tribunal. The tribunal is established under Section 48 of the Copyright Act, that is Cap 130. She serves in the Kenyan Fashion Council as the head of intellectual property and policy in the legal. You have your mic unmuted, please. Can you kindly mute? In the legal committee, she is an adjunct faculty counsel as the head of intellectual property and policy in the legal committee. She is an adjunct faculty member at the Strathmore University Law School, where she teaches sports law, media and entertainment law, as well as business law. Liz is also a copyright at Harvard X Kenya that is run by the law as by the law as well as business law. Liz is also a tutor with copyright, okay, run by the Go Down Arts Center. Liz holds a Master's of Law in Intellectual Property Law from the University of Turin, Italy, and the World Intellectual Property Organization, a Bachelor's of Law from the Catholic University. From the Catholic University, okay. From the Catholic University of East Africa and postgraduate diploma Kenya School of Law. She also holds a certificate in fashion law from the Fashion Law Institute, Fordham University Law School, New York. She also has a professional certificate in IP management, mediation, arbitration from WIPO Academy and Copyright X from Harvard X. So I will stop here in the reading of her profile. Like I said, we send the mentor's profile to us, so we can kindly catch up with the mentors. We can follow them on their different social media platforms and try to get familiar with them. So not to waste any further time, right? Like we earlier said, we'll be taking presentations firstly from the mentors, and then we would move to the mentees. After the mentees present, then we would take feedback from the mentors and then questions and answers. So we have our two mentors in class. Thank you so much, Ms. Bernice, and also to Ms. Liz for joining us in today's session. We are very, 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 very much happy to have you in today's class. So not to waste any time, we would like to give the floor firstly to Ms. Bernice for the next 20 to 25 minutes to just share with us based off of what she has prepared for us in today's class. And then secondly, we'll be moving over to Ms. Liz for her discourse for today's class. So over to you, Ms. Bernice, if you are with us.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to share my screen quickly.
Your screen is up.
Okay.
All right.
Let me know when you can see fashion business.
We can see it, but it's on a minimized slide.
Okay.
On a minimized tab, I mean, rather.
I think it's coming up. It's just taking a while. Thank you. Thank you. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello everyone. Um, I will be talking about fashion business law. So I know that I saw the breakdown of the class and it was 25 minutes to be split across the two mentors, right? So I would just be talking on the foundational aspect of fashion law and I understand there is a mentorship program. So I'll just really be talking about fashion law in general, and then also a bit of my experience. Okay, so I mean, they've done an introduction. I'll just skip this. So I'll be speaking on fashion law in context, and then the scope of fashion law needs and intersection. Oh, okay. So one of the things I like to always address before I jump into what fashion law is specialization in law. I know that as a young lawyer, one of the things you'll be thinking about, and one of the ideas people have on fashion law is that fashion law is very niche, very small, very specialized. And when you focus on fashion law, you most likely will be restricting yourself. However, I like to see specialization from a different lens. And I divide specialization into two aspects: subject matter specialization and industry specialization. When you decide to focus on a subject matter, right, you're focusing on a specific area of law and you're developing your skills across that area. Example is tax law. Tax law would apply regardless of the industry. As long as it's a business, as long as you're an individual existing in the society, you're most likely going to be taxed. You would provide tax services. I know that the Nigerians in the house know that there is the new tax law that we have that applies not just only to companies, but also individuals, right? And we know that individuals and people have used that particular structure to run away from paying tax, but now we're seeing that there are laws across board covering everybody. So you should understand that when you focus on a particular subject matter, that's tax law, environmental law, criminal law, those laws are specified and are focused on a particular subject matter. However, when you look at specialization like fashion law, it falls under industry specialization. That means that I'm going to focus on a particular industry, and regardless of the area of law or the subject matter, I most likely will be able to represent my clients. So if you're going to be representing fashion brands, right, you're going to be representing them across various subject matter. Intellectual property is a subject matter because it will apply regardless of the industry. Somebody in healthcare, somebody in healthcare, for example, would think about intellectual property, right? Data is a subject matter, regardless of the industry that you play in. That's one of the things that you would have to think about. So, although there are industries that obviously there's subject matter that would intersect, right? But you should look at it in that way so that you can get a broader view, right? So, if I'm going to be representing a brand, I just don't need fashion law skills, as it were. I don't just need only IP skills. I need an array of skills that would make me relevant to the brand and to the industry. Next slide. So there are various myths of fashion law, right? That fashion law is about IP. Like I mentioned before, intellectual property is not the only concern of fashion law. Yes, it's very foundational. Yes, it's very important. It's most of the things that you would do, but there are other areas of law that intersect the fashion industry. And I'll be discussing that in my next slide. There's also the fact that fashion law is about the business of fashion. Fashion law it's not just about fashion itself. The word fashion is used in a very generic word landscape, right? It is used to cover other industries like textile, like apparels, like cotton, accessories, footwear, leather works, things like that. So there are a lot of industries or sectors that play in the fashion industry. So when you hear fashion law, it's not just design only. Every single time somebody talks about the fashion industry and is talking about somebody's infringement of dresses, I just get bored sometimes, because that's not the only conversation that we should have when it comes to fashion law. It's not about somebody stealing somebody's design or something like that. Yes, that's very important and that's interesting, but that's not the only thing that you should concern yourself about. If you do that, you'll be limiting your understanding, especially because you play in the African fashion market, right, where you don't see brands. I mean, most brands we register, but there are different conversations that affect a lot of brands and the fashion industry in general. That's not just limited to only fashion. So fashion is an industry that intersects so many other industries, right? You can see different disciplines playing in that industry. You can be a fashion lawyer and you do things that you never thought actually, intersect. And I'm sure that this is not even peculiar to fashion, it's peculiar to other industries, but as long as you're representing clients in the industry, and I know why I'm saying industry, because the industry is wider than just fashion brands alone. Fashion brands are just players in the industry. There are other stakeholders that you have to, bring to mind when you're trying to map out your career as a fashion lawyer. So the Afrocentric approach to understanding fashion, one of the challenges that I had when I was younger was what exactly is fashion law and how exactly is it happening on the African continent? Because when you search online, you find a lot of disputes, foreign judgments on fashion. One of the things that you have to think about is what is the African perspectives to this? What is the African angle to this conversation? If you look at the fashion industry, the African fashion industry, our biggest contribution to the global fashion markets are raw materials, because we are blessed with raw materials, right? So if you look at it and you're saying, what we've seen online is basically intellectual property, business law, things like that. What of other areas that talks about cultural heritage law? Right. And it is amazing, because I know that the second speaker has a particular paper on cultural heritage and cultural heritage law. You would think about it when you see the fashion industry, you're just talking, IP, 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 IP. But because of the abundance of culture that we have in Africa, we have to consider our unique positioning. Recently on Twitter, you would find that there was a conversation, I don't know if you saw it, but it's a conversation about somebody who is a designer. Her name is Uzo. She makes African arts, right? And she misspelled a particular word that I didn't even know was wrong, to be honest, until that particular conversation happened. And a lot of Yoruba people were saying, that's not how to spell, Owambe, that's not how to spell this. And she's currently suffering from the backlash and rage of a lot of people talking about how, appropriation is happening, cultural misrepresentation, things like that. That's a very, very important conversation in the fashion industry and the creative economy at large. So if you're saying just intellectual property protection of XYZ, you most likely would not be bringing your mind, or you'll be confused when certain conversations come up. So you have to look at the African perspective, the African approach to understanding what fashion law is. We are not exactly going to fight. We're not litigious in nature, like New York, for example. They want to fight over everything. And that's a good thing, though. But we don't have that, right? We rather argue. Although that's what we are seeing. We're seeing a lot of brands going to court now, wanting to, go to court, basically. But again, before we get there, we are still at the foundational aspect of the fashion industry in Africa. So you have to understand that, okay, they're not going to court. What exactly are they doing? Is preservation of our cultural heritage and monetization of it, right? We're seeing a lot of festivals pick up now. There are festivals that we never even heard of before, but now they are taking the forefront. Lagos State is running 100 days cultural and arts something, right? And that's because they are trying to monetize all of these things and commercialize, the landscape. So it's important for you to understand that an African approach to understanding fashion law, and it's not necessarily just about, Chanel and Adidas going to court and things like that. You have to have the African experience, or what they are doing differently here. For you to understand fashion law, you have to look at the full life cycle of a fashion product also. Look at the ecosystem, what exactly is happening, how do they think about it, how do they conceive that idea, how do they turn that idea into finished products, how exactly are we marketing, how are we distributing, and after distribution and gets to the consumer, how do we deal with the end of life of that particular product? So you're thinking about the commercial, technical, and legal processes involved in all of these things. From there, you'll be able to map out what the legal, application would be and other technical issues. According to UNESCO, there are two major players in the fashion industry. You have the main players and you have the auxiliary players. The main players are those who are foundational to the fashion industry. They're people who are, generating products, creating designs and things like that. And the auxiliary players are people who are helping with the visibility of fashion. We're talking about PR, content creators, influencers, lawyers, accountants. All of us all play a support role in making the industry where it is. You should understand who are these players so that you know who you're servicing, right? I never knew that, I would have to do things around development financing, but then we are in the fashion market and we have a lot of development agencies around wanting to do research, incubator programs and things like that. And if you're a lawyer not representing brands, you most likely will be working on their team or delivering master classes or helping with law clinic or legal clinic trainings. So yes, and those are things that you have to think about. Those are people who play in the fashion industry, and I just thought it was important to mention them, the stakeholders. There are various laws that intersect, like I mentioned before: intellectual property, cultural heritage law, data protection. Data is how people sell in the age of technology. Before I'm selling to you, I had to understand your buying habits. I have, clients who are building solutions for the fashion market. And for them to actually sell to a particular consumer, they will most likely have taken your data. So how are you managing the data? Conversations around who owns data between the fashion brands and the software platforms, all of these conversations always come into bear. So yeah, you would have to deal with data protection laws. There's also beauty and cosmetic regulations. We saw recently that the federal government banned shea butter or shea seeds or something like that, right? The expectation of shea seeds in Nigeria. So those things also fall under raw materials, right? And I think I mentioned that here, raw material, that's resource sourcing and extractive law rather. That's a particular area of law that we do not talk about, but also intersects with the fashion industry and the beauty industry, and also with the age of sustainability. We are seeing a lot of intersections there. So you would have to understand that. There's also local content law. I think Nigeria has one of the most recent laws on that, right? Where that people who are mining our raw materials are mandated to employ probably 80% or 90% of Nigerian brands or African brands. And in doing that, most of these brands, for them to be enlisted to be recruited by these oil and gas procurement agencies, they have to pass certain certifications, right? There's a particular Nigerian brand that got $1 million in funding for this. I've forgotten their name, Yikudin. They got that because they manufacture shoes, safety shoes, right? So if you are representing a lot of manufacturers, most of them always bid for government agencies, for government, they always bid for things like this, right? So you have to understand how that regulation works and how they can get licensed by the local content board. And then there are other areas. There's development law, there's international trade. You have to understand it. I think with the issue with US and China, of course, you should understand that understanding trade policy, tariffs, and custom regulations are quite important. There's also the real estate aspect. There's environmental sustainability regulations. They're also very important. There's also immigration laws because you're moving talent from place to place like models, and you have to, have certain knowledge on those areas. Yeah, and the fashion industry in Africa is quite profitable. We're seeing that a lot of, money is projected to come from the African fashion market. However, there are a lot of, doubts about it because even if this money is being generated, a lot of people have the opinion that the money is actually going into a lot of people. A lot of, African brands source their products from China. So it's not like we're even getting the money inside. A lot of the money also goes into secondhand clothing. So there are a lot of conversations around that. But yeah, there is still profits to be made if they have the right structure and the right support. I'm getting to the end of my slide. So as a lawyer, as a law student, you should be thinking to provide service across, legal advice and support, compliance and regulation, contract negotiation and review, and dispute resolution. A lot of people want to come to fashion because, they don't want to go to court, but I'm sorry to disappoint you, right? A lot of people in Nigeria and brands at large want to protect their brands. They want to protect their companies. And one of the ways is dispute resolution, although there are other alternative ways rather than go to court. But then again, you have to be very skilled at arbitration, mediation, and the other ones. But then going to court is also one of the major ways, because now we are seeing that people are not even I don't know how to explain it, especially when a party knows their rights. A lot of times they see that mediation doesn't really favor them because they see it as settling. So they would need a lawyer who would support them. I don't want to use the word encourage, but then who would support them, to fighting and enforcing that right. So yeah, dispute resolution is actually quite important in the fashion industry. Yeah, so I went ahead to list out the career paths that you have. There are a lot of career paths. There's trade and business advisory, fashion law education. A lot of fashion schools are coming up. There's also regulations across the fashion industry that is also coming up, and they need people who are skilled in just transferring this knowledge to both lawyers and also, students of fashion schools, right? So yes, there's a lot of advocacy that fashion law should be included in fashion schools, and if that is done, then they would need people who have understanding of the legal aspect of running a business, right? There's fashion tech, there's sustainability, there are just various areas where you can actually do. There is also fashion litigation, like I mentioned before. There's model and talent lawyers. Law is a tool for social engineering. I think it's one of my favorite definitions of law. For you to understand your role as a lawyer in the fashion industry, you have to make them understand the importance of law. The fashion industry is not self-organizing, and the people who have tried to bring structure and structure into the fashion industry are practically lawyers and policy advocates. So one of the roles you'll be doing at this stage of the fashion industry is using law as a tool to actually help them self-organize, right? So there's a lot of council, a lot of organization, a lot of communities coming together to bring fashion professionals together, basically. So you'll be in that area. You'll be playing so much in that area. Yeah, so to be a fashion lawyer in the African fashion market, you have to have an impact mindset. It's quite important because, if you're looking for funding, money, everything, I can't guarantee. Of course, yes, I know that fashion brands, they make a lot of money, right? But that shouldn't really be the first thing you're looking at. It's not bad if it is, but especially in the fashion market, it's still growing, it's still emerging, and yeah. Key takeaways, right? Fashion law connects various disciplines. You should understand that it is very vulnerable, and be a lawyer, there's a lot of room for you to grow. Yeah. I think I'm getting to the end of my slides. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to go to. So yeah, I think that would be mostly the end. I don't think I have anything else. Yeah, it's pretty much what's going on. So yeah, that would be the end of my presentation. The only thing I wanted to say was, if you are in Abuja, I have a fashion city series for free for lawyers and law students who want to engage more and have more extensive conversation on it, and it's free to attend. I'll be here to take any questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pennis, for your very detailed and wonderful presentation. It was very, very nice getting to hear from you, share and highlight those points on fashion law. We sincerely do appreciate. So next we'll be going over to Miss Liz, right, for her own discourse for today's class. I think Miss Pennis was able to stick to her allocated time within 25 to 30 minutes. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. Yes, also Miss Liz will also like to allocate you the same time frame, right, 25 to 30 minutes. We'll really appreciate that, Ma. So welcome again, Miss Liz. We are happy to have you in today's session. It's been a while, Ma.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think I'll just build from what Bernice has presented on. So I think just a highlight of what I do as well is I am the chair of the Copyright Tribunal. So in Kenya, we have a specialized tribunal for the creative space, for the creative economy for copyright industries, which I am the chair/chief judge. So it's interesting times to just watch Kenyan designers and African designers at large in terms of dispute resolution. So I think for me, what I'll put in perspective is share generally first how, the kind of work I do for fashion clients, sorry, so that you get to understand what also Bernice put in perspective. Because fashion law is a term that we have coined over time and sort of borrowed from the US in terms of just amalgamating all these different areas of law and then isolating how they are specifically applicable to the fashion industry. So an example for me, I get a fashion client. They're starting up. So what are some of those things that a fashion lawyer would do? One, it would be helping them from just identifying how are they setting themselves up as a business. So which means you have to have some commercial law understanding, understand their business ideas and goals, and what would be the best strategy for them to register their business. Again, you look at your client's pocket and see what it is they're trying to achieve. You may have your clients may vary from a fashion designer, a fashion school, as Bernice pointed out, might be an event organizer, it might be a photographer, so it might be even also a corporate wanting to work with a designer. I have been, privileged to be part of so I'm head of legal for the National Olympics Committee of Kenya. And like with the previous Olympics last year, one of the things we did a design competition, and we had to create rules of the competition. And then after that, when we isolated the finalists, it was a conversation around how to create the designs, how are we sourcing the fabric, who would get the production agreement or tender, how the designers would get their outfits, the whole shebang. So you can see sort of who your clientele can be. So anyone from government to private sector is possible. So again, how do they register themselves? And then the issue of how important is intellectual property to them? What kind of intellectual property comes into play? Are we talking copyright, trademarks, industrial design? So again, you look at that whole spectrum and you try and understand. Again, of course, with the IP conversation, it will depend also with the long-term, short-term goals that your client has, and looking at also their pocket and seeing how you can protect them. Then, of course, with that comes also now contract law, how contract law can be used to further protect themselves. Again, with contract law means you also have to know employment law, so that then you know what kind of, how do they set themselves up as a business? How do they employ, if it's tailors, what kind of contracts and clauses the tailors would need? Again, this brings me to a conversation or something one of my late lecturers said when I was first year law school. He said that law is a social science. And I think at the time we took it as an insult. But now when I think about it, and with the students I normally teach now, I tell them, actually that means that lawyers can be perceived to be the smartest people in the room, because by way of understanding and knowing the law, you're able to isolate what the law is or what the law should be in places where there is no law. So, just feeding back to that is, again, looking at, the needs in terms of what the client would need. Again, so there's, how they would set up, their employees or employment laws or employment practices. So what kind of contracts would they give? What contracts would they open them up for liability? Like in Kenya, our employment laws are very stringent. So it's a common practice around creatives that they normally give work for hire arrangements or consultancy agreements. So they tend to be quote unquote short term, but a service provider or an employee keeps being brought back on board every 3 months or whatever. So like for us in our law, it's clear that once you have been hired for more than 3 months, you become an employee, which means then you are owed all your statutory payments from Social Security to health insurance and all that. So again, importance of employment law is important, so that then you explain to your client what kind of liabilities they open themselves up to, and what flexibilities they would have depending on the pocket that they have. Again, being the lawyer, you have to also understand the kind of people that they work with and to what extent you need to explain to them the law. I don't know about your scenario in Nigeria, but in Kenya, you find that most of our tailors have not gone to like mainstream schooling, right? Most of them have either gone to college or tertiary, institutions. So then, things like contracts are not words they are normally accustomed to. So that means you have to sit down and explain, tell your client that you have to explain to the tailor what this contract means, how it will affect them. Because, we've seen tailors, quote unquote, stealing designs from their employers, for example. So again, aside from that, again, in terms of leases, how do you advise your client to make the right decisions when they are leasing, a space? Do they want to either have a shop in a mall, or they're setting up a school and all that stuff? So again, you need to know about construction law, you need to know about land law and the different laws, or rather the different leases that would benefit the client. A few years back, I had a startup client, and I remember trying to advise them. And unfortunately, truth be told, we are all lawyers here, or budding lawyers. Creatives can be very difficult sometimes to advise. So sometimes you just have to share your legal advice, and then there's only so much you can do, right? You can take the cow to the stream, but you can't make the cow drink the water, right? So again, in this situation, client had a small budget, or rather, they had quite some amount of money, rather. So I think for them, they thought this money will never run dry. So they wanted to set up a space, and they decided to set up in a mall. They ended up getting 3rd floor. Most of us go to malls. How many of us, by the time we go into a mall, we bother what's on 3rd floor or 4th floor? We're either on the 1st floor or on the last floor where the movie theaters are, depending on how your malls are structured, right? So the list was, in my view, very skewed towards the landlord. So fast forward, client decided, you know what? You don't seem to understand what I want. They signed the lease. They had to put in all the fixtures. All those fixtures ended up becoming the landlord's property, all situation. Anyway, fast forward, they lost a lot of money, and they were out of business within 3 months from setting up. So again, being able to foresee or work to foresee the potential challenges or quote unquote even failures that your client may face. At least they would rather say you told me so than they say you never told me, kind of thing. Again, so you have to know all these different areas of law. Again, when we're talking about setting up of businesses, are there partnership? How are they working with people? Are they collaborating? What kind of collaborations are there? They're working with different creatives, from influencers to models. How does that work? How does that look like? Data protection law has really changed the game, at least for us. I don't know if in Nigeria you guys have the Data Protection Act, but in Kenya we have one. So, and how unfortunately we did our law is we didn't have some exceptions in terms of entertainment. So, which has changed how our contracts look like for, use of images and people's likeness and identity and whatnot, because even just the facial structures as defined by our act state that is data that defines or identifies a person. So it's really changed a lot. So we have more red tape in terms of rights clearances when it comes to image, use, image and likeness and sound, voiceovers and whatnot. So again, you need to understand that whole spectrum. So generally, that's a kind of understanding that you need to have, that has helped, in my business to advise different clients. Again, when it comes to franchises, how to set up a franchise. So franchise law becomes important. If you're working with a franchise, understanding how the franchise works, and how to advise your client accordingly. So you find that it's fashion law means all these different areas of law and how they would apply to different scenarios and situations for a client. So you can't just say, oh, it will be just intellectual property and you're stuck there. So with all the areas of law you've been exposed to, it's really important that you interrogate, what it is that the client needs or they're looking for, and also anticipate. Because as lawyers, that's what we do. We anticipate clients' needs, where they're likely to go, or where they're likely to fall, or what kind of challenges they're likely to face, what trouble they're likely to get into. That's our job as lawyers. So aside from protective lawyering, we are also always on the defense in terms of what challenges to expect. So in my presentation, I had just glazed through intellectual property, which I would like to believe you're conversant with. So understanding the different areas of IP becomes important because, again, IP is literally at the core of fashion businesses. So helping your client understand what assets they're likely to create and how they're going to protect them. Again, depending on who your client is and how they would protect. So you may find that if you're dealing with a community, for example, in regards to community rights, maybe it's a certain tribe, looking at what is in question. Is it a geographical indication? What other elements would be required, like collective marks? Like, how do you help them structure themselves around that? When you find yourself, advising a designer especially, it's always important to see how you can pull them in so that they are with you at the time of design, creation, and everything. Because we've seen instances where, again, unfortunately, creatives and non-lawyers in general tend to think, and I don't know about Nigeria, but in Kenya, they tend to feel like, oh, intellectual property, I can understand for myself. I know what I'm doing. I can do it myself. And then they end up doing the wrong thing. They end up, because they don't understand the system, even some of the elements they protect were either different from what they have executed, like a certain matter we currently have, where a designer registered in an industrial design, and the design they have executed versus what they registered worlds apart. So now, trying to enforce any rights there is becoming a situation, and trying to explain to them that they should have gone to an IP lawyer before they registered would have been prudent is really important. So again, an opportunity there arises in terms of how, as a budding lawyer, especially in the IP space, how you collaborate with some of these IP offices, because some of these IP offices also, unfortunately, purport to be giving intellectual property advice, and yet they only perhaps understand them from a registration-ish level, like not from a legal level per se. So they end up giving a lot of or rather ill-advising clients. So figuring out what that would look like in terms of collaborations can be an opportunity there. Again, understanding trade secrets, because there are some elements that may not be protected under the normal regime of intellectual property, from trademarks to copyright to patents or utility models or industrial designs. So then, what kind of contracts would you need, to craft in that regard? Again, something I wanted to state in the beginning is that when we're talking about fashion law, we see also it cascading into beauty law in terms of cosmetics and the products being created. So they tend to feed into each other a lot. And again, to what Bernice said, regulation law becomes also, again, very important in terms of what are the regulatory requirements, from standardization law to any other issues relating to maybe even handling of chemicals, if your client is working with some chemicals to create some innovation. So you find that there are all these things that tend to come in place. So that's why, again, law becomes a social science. So what are some of the key challenges we face when it comes to IP and fashion? Of course, the question of counterfeiting and piracy across African markets is a big problem in IP in general and in the fashion markets. So again, counterfeiting laws, how are your counterfeiting laws look like, your anti-counterfeiting laws looking like, how are your copyright laws looking like in terms of piracy? Big opportunity there in terms of even policy making. There's the issue of limited awareness of IP, which again also Bernice sort of talked about in terms of some of the establishments of schools, from fashion schools to IP schools or departments. That's an opportunity right there. We have a lot of creatives across Africa who don't understand intellectual property. Some of them don't even understand the importance of law, period, in their business. So identifying that and seeing how you can also become a knowledgepreneur as a lawyer, because there's a very big gap there. There's issue of difficulty in enforcing IP rights across jurisdictions. And I think programs like this then help us sort of interact and know each other and see what other conversations can we have and opportunities can we create to help each other. As now the conversation of the AFCFTA is happening, one of the interesting things that I have heard from these conversations is that they have been talking about a continental IP office. They've been talking about a continental potential IP court. I hear the IP court may fail, but then that would be an opportunity. Someone might set up a dispute resolution center for IP in Africa. It's an opportunity, or even in your different regions, and figure out how to spread it across Africa. So again, that's an opportunity. Then another challenge would be infringement through fast fashion and digital platforms. I don't know if we'll ever get rid of fast fashion. I think it will just be a matter of, again, thinking creatively around how to make fast fashion work for us, because there's conversations around environmental issues, what fast fashion means for the environment, all these landfills and garbage that can be gotten rid of. The issue of how to regulate infringement in the digital space, what opportunities are there. So again, when you understand the law in its entirety, you're able to think outside the box and you're able to give solutions and start contributing towards some of these solutions that are much needed. So in a nutshell, some of the roles that an African lawyer can play in this space: advising designers and brands on registration and protection of IP, and even collaboration. Then there's the drafting of licenses, distribution agreements, and distribution speaks to different things from fashion chains, fashion stores, what are they called? Some of these courier services like DHL. How does your client get to distribute their wares or sell their wares across the continent? as we figure out AFCFTA, because this is a long game. So advocating for stronger IP laws and enforcement mechanisms, not only at a local level, but at a regional and international level. Opportunity coming through now, guiding clients on cross-border trade and IP compliance. Hopefully AFCFTA becomes a reality, and that means again more work for all budding fashion lawyers and IP lawyers in general. Then facilitating dispute resolution in IP conflicts. Again, sometimes as a lawyer, you feel like you want to chest stamp. Again, sometimes as a lawyer, we really need to understand that sometimes it's not about our egos, it's about what is best for the client. So sometimes you may decide that because you're good at litigation, this case must go through litigation, but then maybe litigation is not the best route for them. So again, it's really important that when you're thinking about dispute resolution, ask yourself what suits your client best and work around that. Again, IP has a shelf life of a banana. So you can imagine being stuck in litigation 3 years, 6 years, 10 years. What does that mean for the intellectual property your client has created? So being aware of the shelf life of intellectual property, you have to be very smart in terms of thinking outside the box, so that you're able to help your clients better. So what opportunities are there for African lawyers building the niche in fashion law and IP? In all honesty, you won't be able to make this entirely your bread and butter. So maybe IP in general might be a better shot. Because like myself, my IP legal studio is literally a IP sub-legal boutique. So we are only specializing in intellectual property, entertainment, media, sports, fashion law. Our core business is literally IP protection, IP strategy, registrations, and dispute resolution. Like that's what we are generally about. And then any other needs that our clients want, we have partners for that. My celebrity client or my fashion client is getting married. They need to figure out what their wheels might look like, or they may be relocating to where their spouse lives. They have people for that. So I don't try to purport to be a Jill of all trades. I have chosen IP as my specialty, and that's that. But so if you want, I think there's an opportunity depending on how you structure yourself. Then partnering with global fashion brands and entering the African market. There are soon conversations around some of these international brands getting into the African market. So those are opportunities. Put yourself in the right places to network and know more people. Take the chance to also network with, if it's the America Chamber of Commerce that you have in Nigeria. Those are great places to meet people. The different consulates and embassies usually have also such business communities. Those are good places to go and network and meet people, and you never know what comes out of there. Supporting the creative economy through legal innovation. I've spoken about some of those opportunities that are possible, are available for lawyers. And again, I will keep reiterating, law is a social science, so you can do a lot with that in terms of finding opportunities. Engaging in policy and advocacy and thought leadership, also good opportunity in terms of where to find your space. And then leveraging digital tools in support to support designers in protecting their IP, and even to support yourself as a legal practitioner and how you can think outside the box. We've been having conversations around AI replacing lawyers. I don't think they can replace us, but you can maybe innovate around AI and see what you can, bring out. So some case studies that I thought to highlight that sort of speak into the needs that we have in Africa. We have Sarah Diouf, whose bag, the Tongoro bag, or rather Tongoro is her brand. So she had created a baguette bag that was infringed upon by YSL. I don't think she did much in terms of pursuing it. But again, also, I think there's a possibility she had not registered her intellectual property, so maybe that's why. So, but this shows the need to understand IP in the African setup and in the creative economy in general. The need to be able to understand the difference between parallel imports and counterfeits. This is a South African case I thought was interesting because when we're talking about IP, most of the time we're also talking about infringement, but we forget also there's the issue of parallel imports and how to tell the difference and what opportunities can arise from that in terms of the legal landscape. So I think going forward, there's opportunities to increase awareness in IP, strengthen enforcement of IP laws, encourage collaborations between lawyers, policymakers, creatives, corporates, business people, and position African lawyers as global thought leaders in fashion and IP. I think that goes without saying. Even every time a client walks to you and they're second guessing why they need you, ask them, do you think the YSLs and the Givenchy's are what they are without law? Of course not. So making them understand that and painting that picture is really important, even for you be able to secure that bag. In conclusion, fashion is not only about style, it's also about IP. African lawyers have a unique opportunity to lead in shaping and protecting this industry. And with the right expertise, they can empower creatives, strengthen Africa's place in the global fashion economy. So my last words to you is always invest in yourself as a budding lawyer because the knowledge is so much. And for you to grow, you must be in situations where you expose yourself to different things, different knowledge, different circumstances and scenarios, and expand your school of thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Liz, for that very detailed and wonderful presentation. We really sincerely did enjoy it, and we were able to learn quite a lot from everything you had to share. From both mentors, you people have done a fantastic job giving us an introduction into the topic for today. And we will be getting back to you in a few minutes from now. But from now, we will be going back to the mentees to just basically hear from their research and everything that they have done. We want to hear what they have been able to find out as they make their presentation. So we have two groups who are to present, group 1 and group 2. Please, you both have 10 to 15 minutes each for your presentation. We would really, really love if you can stick to time. So please, as much as possible, try to ensure that you stick to time. So we'll be moving over to the group presenter for group 1. If you are ready, we are also ready for you. Please, you can go ahead, share your slides, and then start your presentation. Do we have the presenter for group 1?
Yes, I'm with you, sir. I'm about to share my screen.
All right, thank you, Cosio. Please remember you have 10 to 15 minutes for your presentation.
All right, good evening, everyone. Please can you see my screen? All right, sir. So, firstly, I'll start by appreciating our mentors for the very enlightening presentation they made, and quite honestly, they've covered most of what will be subsequently presented in this presentation. So basically, group 1 is going to be making a presentation of fashion business and law. And in order to put this in context, I would like to state that this entire presentation is just to clarify um, and shed more light on fashion, the business and legal aspects of fashion. So, like our speaker, our mentor mentioned, that is Ms. Benz, she mentioned that fashion has been over time been mistaken to just do with designer wears, luxury, and maybe fashion shoes. But beyond that, it extends even to the business and legal aspects, and that is the basis of our presentation today. So, fashion business basically it has to do with the strategic, commercial, and entrepreneurial aspects of managing and growing both fashion brands and other aspects of fashion. right? So it has a lot. It just has to do with entrepreneurial aspect of fashion, and it involves decision making around design, production. It covers a whole lot of industries, and like our speaker noted, I will just be highlighting some of these industries in my presentation. So we have design and creation industry, manufacturing and production, which have to do with raw materials and the likes. We have the supply chain management. We have the marketing and branding. That's the public and PR personnel coming and ambassadors and the whole lot of that coming. And then we have retail and distribution. We have consumer trends and demands, and we have various other aspects of fashion, which we would look at in this presentation. So now, what is the importance of law in fashion? So, like I mentioned earlier, this presentation is on the business and legal side of fashion, of the fashion industry. So now, why is fashion important? But even before I go into that, I would like to clarify that even as our speaker, mentor has earlier mentioned, fashion law is usually it tends to be mistaken to just do with intellectual property. But while intellectual property is the basis or it's one of the major aspects, legal aspects of fashion industry, it's not just exclusive to intellectual property. It also has to do with quite a whole lot of other aspects. For instance, you have the commercial aspect, which has to do with commercial laws and the likes. We have contract and agreement. In fact, the contracts aspect of the fashion industry is another very um, large aspect of it. We have collaboration, we have advertising regulations, we have labor and employment as well, because the fashion industry has to do with quite a number of persons, stakeholders in the industry. We have designers, we have entrepreneurs, we have marketers, we have even um, creatives and content creators and the likes. So all of these people fall with over time probably have labor and employment agreements between them, and that's another aspect of fashion law. So we have consumer protection and competition, and even social responsibility policies. So moving straight into the importance of law in the fashion industry. Now, the law in fashion industry helps to protect against piracy and counterfeiting. So the fashion industry is based largely on creativity and design, and it's given that it's also susceptible to piracy and counterfeiting, and that is where the law regulating this industry comes in. So the law helps to protect fashion designers and even creatives in the industry from people who might tend to, you know, want to make quick profit or um, exploit their intellectual and you know, creativity basically without compensation or credit. So it also helps to secure and protect brand identity. And most creatives and stakeholders in the fashion industry usually come under a brand identity. So think of Gucci, think of most of the popular luxury brands, fashion and luxury brands. All of these things are brand identity. And so the law also helps to secure and protect this brand identity from infringement or from people misusing these identities. Going forward in my presentation, I will highlight some of the laws that are specifically relevant to this all of this importance. So next we have securing creators' rights and innovation. This is very similar to the first. It helps to protect the innovation, the creativity, and the intellectual effort of creators in the industry. It also encourages investment, partnerships, and participation. So most people it encourages people to invest their time, their resources, their money, and every other thing they have into this industry, because without an assurance of protection, without an assurance of sustainability of the industry, they would be less likely to invest all of this into the industry. So the law helps to also encourage investment, participation, and partnership in the industry. Also, it helps to ensure sustainability. So one of the major factors driving the fashion industry, aside other part of it, is the legal part of is the law guiding it basically. So without this law, there's every likelihood of breakdown and chaos in the industry, such that in a few years to come, the industry would have either declined or would have been completely abolished, more or less. So the law guiding this industry helps to ensure that the industry is sustainable, and it does this by ensuring compliance practices, both environmental wise, promoting ethical practices and the likes. So those are some of the major importance, even though that is not all. Moving on, the overview of the Nigerian industry. So the Nigerian fashion industry, as Ms. Bernice noted as well, is one of it's a very large industry basically. So in Africa, it's Africa's second largest industry, according to reports by the Nations newspaper recently. And Nigeria contributes a whopping 15% to this particular industry. So that is how That is how major Nigerian contribution to the fashion industry is. So it's an industry that requires all of this effort and all of this consideration we are giving to it, because given its large, its size and all of it. So Nigerian fashion industry is also valued at over $4.7 billion, and this is also according to research by a prominent organization. So we are moving on to the intellectual property rights in the fashion industry. So I believe that we're very familiar with most of this. So quite a number of intellectual property rights apply to the fashion industry. We have copyright. Of course, we know that copyright applies to literary and artistic works. And aside the common books, literary works like music and the like, we have how it applies to the fashion industry as well. So you might have seen certain dresses, you might have seen certain fashion items, basic fashion products that have unique designs, and designs not in the context of brand identity now, but designs. To take, for instance, you have your Adire patterns and the like. So all of those kind of designs are not all anyways, but most of them are susceptible to copyright protection, especially when they can be, when they are alienated from the material they are put upon. They can still be um, mapped out somewhere else. So copyright applies to the industry as well. Then we have trademark. Trademark is something we're also very familiar with. It has to do with the protection of brand identity basically. So when it comes to trade, when it comes to the production of goods and services, there's usually certain names, certain logos, certain marks basically that distinguish one business from the other. So that is where trademark comes in. So most business register their business as a trademark, such that subsequent businesses cannot use such marks or marks that are similar or similarly confusing with it. Right? And trademark protection lasts for consecutive 14 years. Right? Then we have the law that applies to trademark. The major framework for trademark protection in Nigeria is the Trademarks Act, which was enacted basically in 2004. Then we have the next industrial design. So the industrial design as well, so it usually protects. It may consist of three-dimensional features such as the shape or the surface of the article, or two-dimensional features and the like. So industrial design has to do it, and this one particularly applies to the fashion industry because aside copyright and others, the fashion industry deals with a lot of designs, and most of these designs are susceptible to industrial design protection. And in Nigeria, industrial designs are protected, or they are largely governed by the Patent and Designs Act. An industrial design lasts for 5 years, up to a maximum of 25 years. Then we have trade secrets. Trade secrets are peculiar information that promotes or that are relevant to a particular business. So in the context of fashion, a fashion designer, a fashion business might have a particular knowledge or information, a particular procedure which they follow, to come out about their designs, their unique designs and patterns and all of that. So these designs are maybe trade secrets in the sense that they are not readily available to the entire public, and they are exclusive to this particular business, and they are exploited for their benefit. So trade secrets are, of course, they're not generally registrable, but the best protection that can be given to them is confidentiality. So if such applies to the fashion industry, it's left to the fashion designer or the fashion business to ensure the um, secrecy of such information or such secrets as name implies. So moving on to the next. So that is majorly the laws that apply to the fashion industry. Of course, that is not all of the intellectual property laws. We have quite a number of others, and not just intellectual property rights or laws. We have other laws like I mentioned earlier that applies to the fashion industry. But moving on quickly to the challenges faced in the fashion industry in Nigeria particularly. So one of the most significant challenges, and as our two mentors mentioned, they spoke about some of the challenges, but I will highlight some others. So one of the major challenges that is faced in Nigeria, especially in the fashion industry, is the limited coverage of copyright laws in Nigeria. So a particular reference is made to Section 26 of the Copyright Act, which provides that even though, simply put now, even though a design or an item is susceptible to copyright, given the definition and the threshold laid down for copyright protection, even though a design is susceptible to that. If, however, it is mass, if, however, it's um, how do I put this? If, however, it is also susceptible to industrial design protection, if however, it is like an industrial design as stipulated in the Patent and Designers Act, it will not be susceptible to copyright protection anymore. So, giving an illustration, if a design is made, maybe a particular dress is made and it has a design that's susceptible to copyright, but maybe this design is now mass produced such that it becomes an industrial design, it will no longer be eligible for copyright protection. That is what that particular provision says. So that is one of the challenges faced in the fashion industry. Also, there's also weak enforcement, and even as our second mentor mentioned, the weak enforcement in the copyright industry generally. So even though there are institutional Nigerian Copyright Commission, they tend to focus more on the literary and artistic aspect more than even in the fashion industry. So they are more concerned in books, music, and the likes, lack of judicial expertise. So the courts of the present day courts are not so specialized in the areas of fashion, in fact, in IP generally, and specifically in the fashion industry. And you find out that for the little cases that make it to court, you will most times realize that there are usually technicalities in the judgment given, more or less. So in fact, the judicial framework we have in Nigeria um, is not exactly perfect for the fashion industry, just to put it that way. So those are some of the challenges that are faced in Nigeria. So we have certain case studies here. So you notice that most of the cases here are not Nigeria specific, and that is because little to no cases on fashion law specifically are currently in Nigerian jurisprudence. But these particular cases are landmark cases that even shape the discourse on fashion law in Nigeria. So the case of Star Athletica versus Varsity Brands, it was the Supreme Court, um, of the US Supreme Court judgment that you know, provided light to the issue of copyright. So it noted that a design that has aesthetic values and also non-utilitarian features, can be protected by copyright. So giving an illustration, if a dress, like I mentioned earlier, even though it's a dress, but it has certain designs of it, and these designs they can be alienated from that particular material and be put elsewhere, and that design will still be applicable. It can be susceptible to copyright. So, similarly, in the City Khadija Apparel versus Ariana Textiles, this was a Malaysian case that also highlighted the fact that some religious wears can also be susceptible to protection, right, under fashion law. Then we have other this one was particularly on copyright cases. Then we have others on trademark. This one noted that we have the Christian Louboutin versus, if I'm getting pronunciation right, Very Saint Laurent. Right, it highlighted the fact that a single color can also be, depending on certain um, depending on certain criteria, it can also be susceptible to trademark protection. Right, and also the Burberry versus Target case. It it also highlighted the fact that brands can protect distinctive patterns from unauthorized use, basically. So these are some landmark cases in this regard. Then we have the part of licensing and franchising the fashion business. So while these two terms are very similar, there tend to be some difference between them. So licensing basically is when a brand owner gives another party the rights to use his intellectual property. And intellectual property in the sense of its name, its logos, or maybe its unique designs, and that will be in exchange for certain fees or royalties. And while franchising is almost similar, it's a bit different. So in the case of franchising, a brand allows another party to run a complete business operation under its own brand. So I would give certain examples, but let me go ahead to highlight the differences. So with every franchise agreement is always a license to use the business intellectual property. So a franchise, a license, as I mentioned earlier, is a business giving a person or an intellectual property holder giving another person, a third party, the right to use its intellectual property, which is supposed to be exclusive to it in relation to maybe a business or a product. But then a franchise is letting another a franchise on the other hand is allowing another party to run its own business but under your brand name. So yes, the second difference that was highlighted here is that licensing agreements are limited to grant another business the right to use the intellectual property, but it does not necessarily control how the other business is to be operated. However, franchise agreements are broader and they control how the business operates. So putting it in context, Adidas, um, Adidas has an extension in Nigeria, but um, it does not exactly control how that business is run. So what was done in that particular scenario was a franchise, a franchise actually. It's franchised its business to Brandco such that Brandco Nigeria Limited is now running the business but under the Adidas trademark. And the reason for this will be highlighted in the subsequent pages of the slide. Okay. So let me talk about the types of licensing before I go into that. The types of licensing we have are exclusive, non-exclusive, and then the sole licensing. So the exclusive licensing is when a business gives, as the name implies, an exclusive license to another, a third party, such that um, even itself may not be able to use the intellectual property. So maybe a business license is named to a third party. That third party will have exclusive ownership over the name for the period of the licensing agreement. For a non-exclusive license, it grants the permission to use its intellectual property to a third party. However, that license is not exclusive in the sense that the initial owner of the um, intellectual property, let's say it's a trademark, can still grant license to another third party to use the same. So you can have one, let's say, trademark being licensed to more than one person, maybe two or three more people using the trademark together. That is because the license that was given to maybe the initial person, either of them, was not an exclusive one. And then we have sole licensing. In the case of sole licensing, a business grant is almost similar to exclusive licensing, but in the sense that in the case of a sole licensing, the initial owner of the intellectual property, let's say it's a trademark, can still use it, can still operate with that intellectual property. So if it's a trademark, it licenses it to a third party, but then that is the initial owner can still make use of the intellectual property. So yes, moving on to the next, the benefits of licensing and franchising. So for the franchise, so that is the person that is franchising his business or is franchising his intellectual property generally. It ensures a rapid expansion. So I gave the example of Adidas. So if not for if not for the franchising agreement between Adidas and Brandco Nigeria Limited, it probably would have not had an extension in Nigeria. So it allows for rapid expansion into new markets. So the business might not be able to operate independently or in every other jurisdiction, but they can extend their reach there by franchising their business. So for the franchisee, it allows the franchisee, that is the person that is being franchised, the person that is granted permission to use the intellectual property, it grants them the ability to do their business with already recognized name. So it saves them the stress of trying to like start up their own business from scratch with in a new name basically. So it gives them the opportunity to use an already recognized name to do business. Then what are the risks associated with it as well? For the franchisor, um, it might lead to poorly managed outlets. So I'll give an example. So we have KFC in many locations in Nigeria. So there's every tendency that you might eat in one today and on another day you get to eat in another. So if, for instance, the second one is managed by another business that was franchised the trademark or the license that was franchised the business name, there's every tendency that that particular outlet might not meet up the standard of the original owner. So there might be a particular threshold for which the business is low. But if the customers get to meet a different or a lower quality somewhere else, they tend to lose trust or confidence in the business. So that is a risk for the franchisor. Um, And then on the other hand, contract breaches, if any of the party breaches the contract, it might be harmful and it might lead to vulnerability for the other party. So yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation. I believe we have learned a thing or two from it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Uh, well done to you and your team for putting it together. So not to waste any further time, please can we have Group 2's presentation so that we can get back to our mentors for their feedback to presentations, and then they can add any maybe any other thoughts they would like to share, right? They can do that. So group presenter for Group 2, I hope you are ready.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm so sorry, I have a cold, so pardon me. Okay, let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, so I will be speaking on fashion business and law. So this topic is one that sits right in the intersection of creativity, commerce, and regulation, basically. So, first of all, I'd like to point out the fact that fashion isn't just about clothing or style. It's actually a global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And behind every runway show, retail store, and fashion brands, there are business models and legal frameworks working quietly in the background. But I would like to speak on how these fashion startups raise capital to bring their ideas to life. And once products are created, how do they get from the designer's sketchbook to global markets? And also, what happens when someone copies a design or when a customer buys online and wants a refund? So these are the kind of questions where business and law meets fashion. And that's exactly what I will be exploring today in this presentation. So the first thing is financing, basically source of capital. So the first question for any fashion entrepreneur is, where is the money coming from, right? And we're all aware that fashion is capital intensive. Basically, you need money for every single thing before you push it out there for sales. You need money for fabric, for production, for paying staff if you have staff, for renting space if it's necessary, for marketing and distribution. So fashion businesses may obtain financing from internal or external sources. And by that, we're talking about personal savings, family and friends, loans, grants, or investors. So we're moving on to fashion startup funding. And there are several like fashion startup funding available to fashion entrepreneurs. And I will be speaking on each of them. The first one is personal funding. So most fashion brands begin with personal money, like your savings or sometimes money borrowed from family and friends. You can also get funding from grants, like maybe from governments or some government organizations. They provide non-repayable money or capital to support creative industries. We also would identify debt financing. This basically means borrowing money that you have to pay back, obviously, with interest most of the time. An example would be your commercial bank loans, your microfinance banks, or even credit lines. So The mix of funding depends on your stage of growth and your appetite for risk, basically, and if you believe in the business that you're about to start up. So up next, we're talking about financial instruments. And financial instruments are basically tools that businesses use to raise or to manage money. We've identified equity financing. This basically means when you raise money for your business by selling ownership shares in that business instead of taking a loan. We also identified hybrid instruments. So this is a combination of the features of debt and equity financing. For example, like your convertible notes, like a loan that can later be converted into shares of the company. So another financial instrument is trade finance instruments. So these are tools that support international fashion trade, like letters of credit or invoice discounting. So they basically help brands. They help brands secure raw materials or ship goods abroad without paying cash upfront. So up next is investor relations. So what do we mean by this? This basically means managing your relationship with the people who fund your business, like the investors who fund your business. And it's basically about trust and communications, because investors would want to know that their money is safe, that their money is growing. And this involves sharing business updates, financial reports, growth plans, and basically being transparent when challenges arise. And good investor relations can determine whether investors continue to support your fashion brand or walk away. So the next is retail models. So these are basically the modes at which you distribute your fashion pieces when they are done with production. So the first one is brick and mortar retail. This basically means like this is the traditional physical store, like a literal shop built with bricks and mortar. From like the name alone, it's self-explanatory. An example is like your Zara at the mall, your Adidas, and so on. The next one is e-commerce. This is basically selling online, selling your fashion pieces or your products online through your website or like platforms like Shopify, Bumper Shop, Jumia, ASOS, or maybe even Instagram, your basic social media platforms. And advantages of e-commerce is for wider reach and basically convenience for customers who don't want to walk into a physical store. They can, from the comfort of their homes, purchase your fashion pieces or your products. But a challenge from that is there is usually high competition, because I mean, from Instagram alone, once you go on Instagram, there is like several people selling a particular style of dress, and like the competition is high, and basically that's a challenge. The next retail model is the omni-channel retail. So this basically is the combination of online and offline shopping experiences. For example, a customer sees your jacket online and decides, okay, they're not so sure of their sizing. So they decide to come to your store and try it on and probably buy through the app once they are sure of their sizing from your store. And it ensures like a seamless customer journey across all platforms. The next retail model is direct to customer, D2C. So this is basically when the brand sells its products directly to the final consumer. And this entails cutting all middlemen like your wholesalers, department stores, distributors, and all of that. The next one is the franchise retail. So this basically allows a brand to expand by authorizing others to use its name, its design, its system or logo in return for fees or royalties. For example, I think a brand is, I think Mango. Mango is one of it because I think they have a Mango store in Lagos or something. So that's an example of franchising because Mango is not, it's not a Nigerian brand. So I think Zara as well. Zara has a store in several countries. I don't think they have in Nigeria, but you get the point. The next one is wholesale to retail method and model. So in this model, a designer sells bulk to wholesalers or retail stores, and then those wholesalers or retailers now go ahead to sell to final consumers, basically. It's common in fashion because designers may not have the capacity to sell directly to every customer. So another, like other retail models that I think should be included in pop-up shops, but I think that should be like a subsidiary or a subheading in the brick and mortar model. The only difference is, for example, temporary stores, like they're not like permanent, just pop-up store for like maybe just a day or a few hours, just to create buzz and exclusivity. For example, like a 3-day or 1-day luxury handbag pop-up in a trendy location or like a popping, like happening place. And yeah, I think that should be it. The next thing to discuss is digital distribution. So digital distribution in fashion is basically all about using digital platforms and technology to deliver your fashion products and even fashion experiences to customers. So instead of only relying on physical stores, brands can use the internet and digital tools to get their collection of fashion pieces into the hands of their customers or into the screens of their customers, basically. And digital distribution goes beyond selling clothes online. It also includes like streaming fashion shows and all of that. It's just a very broad way of having to share your fashion products or fashion experiences to your customers. Up next should be intellectual property in fashion. So fashion thrives on creativity. And when you hear creativity, obviously you know that copying is rampant. And that's where intellectual property comes in because it protects originality through trademarks, copyrights, patents, trade secrets, and all of that. So there are different types of infringements. And the first one is copyright. So copyright protects the original creative works in fashion. And this could be artworks, prints, fabric patterns, or even the photo shoots of or campaign videos. And infringement happens when someone copies or reproduces a copyrighted work without proper licensing, authorization, or permission. So an example of that is, let's say a designer creates a unique floral print, and then another brand copies that exact print on their dresses. without permission, or maybe a photographer, his fashion campaign photos are used by another brand for advertising without proper licensing. So this is when copyright infringement happens. The next one is trademark infringements in fashion. So trademark basically protects, I would say, brand identifiers like names, logos, slogans, even colors. For example, like, I don't know if you guys know Tiffany. Tiffany, the jewelry brand, I think their color, the blue color, is trademarked. It's specifically designed, like it's specific, you can identify that color with that company. So infringement happens when someone uses a confusingly similar mark on goods or services, misleading consumers into thinking it's from the original brand. An example is a company selling sneakers with a logo that is almost identical to Nike's check mark, or a handbag with the same LV monogram, but produced without authorization from Louis Vuitton. And this creates counterfeits, and then it damages the brand's reputation, because a normal consumer or customer that is a huge fan of Louis Vuitton would probably see such products and they think it's from the main company, and they're most likely buying lower quality, and eventually they think that Louis Vuitton is just bad quality. So this damages their brand reputation. So the next copyright infringement will be patent infringement in fashion. So patents protects new, useful, and innovative inventions. So in fashion, this can be stitching technology, or like wearable tech, or even shoe sole designs if they meet patent criteria. And infringement happens when someone makes or sells or uses a patented invention without the patent owner's permission. An example would include a fashion brand inventing a, let's say, self-heating jacket, and they patented this particular function for their fashion brand and their fashion piece. And then other companies or other fashion brands decide to copy that function for their outfits. So that's when patent infringement happens in fashion. The next one is industrial design infringement. So industrial design protects the aesthetics, or like the ornamental features of a product, the look and the feel, not the function. I think that's the difference between industrial design and patent. So this one is just the aesthetics and the look and the feel. So the infringement of industrial design happens when, for example, a competitor copies a product's unique visual appearance that is registered as a design. Like if a luxury brand registered a unique shape of, say, a handbag or a design of sunglasses, and another company makes a very similar version, so that's design infringement. Another example is the legal battle over, I think, the Birkin bag design, or Louis red soles. So these are like examples of industrial design infringements in fashion. So next on the list is international enforcement. So because fashion is global, you would expect that infringement is global. So the solution to this is the the international treaties like the Paris or the Berne Convention. So this makes it like much easier for fashion entrepreneurs and fashion brand owners to protect their intellectual property in their fashion pieces or their brands and whatnot. So, for example, if you register your trademark for your fashion brand in Nigeria, you are technically protected in Nigeria because intellectual property is more national than it is worldwide. So if you want to protect your intellectual property in several other countries, because I mean, eventually you see yourself growing. The Paris and the Berne Convention makes it easier because they have countries that are signatories to these the agreement. So if you happen to register under these treaties, it automatically covers the countries that are also like signatories to these conventions. So that's that about the international enforcement. So next, we'll be talking about the contracts that are very useful in fashion business. So the first one is manufacturing and supply contracts. So this is basically where business meets the factory. So these contracts spell out things like delivery dates, the quality standards, the pricing and penalties for delay. So if you don't get this right, you risk an entrepreneur would risk late deliveries or poor quality, or even suppliers stealing your designs. The next one is retail and distribution contracts. So this basically covers how products get to customers. So they include the pricing and margins, the exclusivity of the deals, and territorial restrictions. So an example is a brand may allow only one store in Lagos to stock a collection and to keep exclusivity. Sorry. The next one is marketing and enforcement contracts. So this is a legal agreement between a fashion brand and another party. I would assume they meant marketing and endorsement contracts. So another party such as influencers, models, advertising agency and whatnot. So these contracts regulate relationships with celebrities, your influencers, and they state how long the deals last and what content the influencer is meant to post, when to post such content, and what happens if the influencer damages the brand's reputation. So a famous example would be Adidas and I think Kanye West, and how they had to quickly end their contract with him because he violated certain contractual terms in the agreement. So up next is the enforcement contracts. So these contracts are put in place to help protect and to enforce rights. And for fashion, they can cover clauses on how disputes would be resolved, whether arbitration or like going to court, litigation, basically, penalties for the breach of contracts, provisions that allow one party to monitor or audit the other for like compliance. In simple terms, it's the legal safety nets inside your contracts that ensures
Hello, Rose, can you hear us? Please, can anyone hear me? I'm having a little network challenge, so I don't know if she has rounded up or she's still on it.
So I can hear you.
Oh, all right. So I think it must be a challenge from her. I think it's fine if we round up. I think she was almost done with the presentation, and but she didn't get to complete it. But anyways, thank you to both groups for their time and the presentations that they made. We really appreciate the efforts that went into the presentation from both groups. So we would be going back to our mentors quickly for their feedbacks, and then we'll take questions and call it a day. So we would go firstly back to Miss Dennis, if she has any feedback or any other thing she would like to add in regards to today's class or any thoughts she would like to share. Ms. Benis, if you are with us, we'd like to hear from you, ma'am.
Hello. Okay, I think the presentation was, you're all good generally. I just think that maybe the first one was a little long and the slides were a little bit filled, but like generally it was all great presentation.
All right, well, all right, thank you. To Miss Liz, do you have anything you would like to say as regards the presentation or any other thing you would like to add in regards to what we have discussed in today's class?
I think it was great to observe that both groups had really interrogated what fashion law means. And it was good to see the detail and the different dimensions that they ventured into in their presentations. Because I think it's pretty obvious that you can see that fashion law is quite extensive, or even just the conversation around fashion law and the business of fashion is quite extensive. So I hope that all the groups will also exchange presentations and everything. And yeah, continue learning and seeing how this space is usually very dynamic. It's always changing. And again, it always calls for a lot of creative lawyering. So it's not the normal run-of-the-mill lawyering that you're used to in this space. You have to really think outside the box. Just an interesting experience I had when I was doing the fashion law course in New York. We had a very renowned designer who was giving us her experience with her lawyers when she was, brokering a deal with an international slash their own, like an American distributor. They were in this big collaboration. I won't mention names because she asked us to keep it confidential. But she was just basically telling us how for her, because she's a celebrity, right, who was venturing into fashion, and she shared how she got really frustrated by trying to find the right lawyer for her business, and like any celebrity or person with money, they thought the big law firms would sort her out. And then at some point, the law firm was dropping the ball on her deal. And she was just seeing now this client she wants to contract with is now sort of pulling away. And she was like, I went to a big law firm. I thought they'd understand what I want and what I need. So eventually she ended up getting a non-lawyer to lawyer for her, someone who's in the fashion business, who was in the fashion business, and who was more of an investor type of person, who is a person who helped her seal the deal. And she was basically saying, you know what, her biggest lesson was, just because it's a big law firm, it doesn't mean that they understand what that she needed. And so she was basically encouraging those of us who are like venturing out on our own that we are doing the right thing, and by virtue of trying to understand the nuances of the fashion space, entertainment space, that we were doing the right thing. So I'd say the same thing to you. And for those who may end up working in big law firms, it's really important that you first understand who you are as a lawyer, and then you're able to also correct your seniors in a respectful way. Because when we talk about intellectual property, entertainment, fashion, you find that for the older lawyers, it's not really something that they understand. So you find that most of the time they would want to operate in the old school way, for lack of a better term. So if you end up working for a senior lawyer, an older lawyer, I think it's important that you correct them. I've also been in a situation where a friend of mine was working in a big law firm, and they had a fashion law dispute. And of course, she was in a big law firm. And so the big law firm was going against it's just an SME type of designer, startup. And this startup designer had shared some collection of shorts that she had not even, I can say design loosely, but the fabric was one of those generic fabrics that were produced either in China or something. And it just happened to be quote unquote a unique print at the time. It was just a print that had not yet really penetrated the Kenyan market. So then now this friend of mine was telling me how the boss was trying to make her assert IP in a space where there was none. Like none of them had anything like really creative apart from the brand. And the brands were different. And that was not what was in contention. They were contesting the short, and there were no design elements that their client could claim. This other client was just like, you know what, me, I just took a fabric, made some shorts, and I'm selling them, moving on swiftly. Whoever buys, sort of thing. So I remember telling her at the end of the day, I think this is more of an issue of what kind of lawyer are you, or do you want to be known as? Because again, truth be told, when you get into the profession, if you're not already practicing, is unfortunately you've been spaces where you have bosses who want you also to do the wrong thing. Truth be told. So that means you as a lawyer, you have to be empowered with the right knowledge. You have to be empowered in a way that you can respectfully correct your seniors. And depending on the values that you stand on, when it's not making sense, please walk away. At the end of the day, as lawyers also, we're supposed to be defending the truth. We're supposed to be upholding the law and upholding what is right. We don't have a great reputation as lawyers in general. So already just getting people to trust us is a thing. So when you have people that trust you, don't compromise that for anything. Money will come and go, but integrity should be there to stay. Yeah, those are my thoughts, and kudos to all the groups.
Thank you so much, Miss Liz, for your shared thoughts. We really, really do appreciate everything that you have shared with us in today's class, starting from the breakdown of, what intellectual property in fashion law is. You spoke about the challenges of intellectual property, the challenges in the fashion law space, and some other specific things that you pointed out, including the opportunities. Both you and Miss Dennis have highlighted quite a lot in today's class that I wish and I hope our students or participants rather were taking very serious note of. So we want to give the opportunity, before we round up with today's class, we want to give the opportunity to those who might have come up with a question or two for our mentors that they would like to ask, a question that they would like to clarify within the space of the fashion business and law space, right? So please, if you have a question, you can kindly indicate by raise of hand, or you can drop your question in the chat box. I'll be reading it out to the mentors for them to answer. So please, if you have a question, let's quickly take 2 or 3 questions as we call it a wrap to class. Do we have questions?
Hi, sir. Good evening, sir.
All right, good evening, Mr. Babatunde. Please, you can go ahead and ask your question.
So, I just love to ask a question regarding this fashion law. Well, I understand that fashion law is can consider it an emerging area of law in globally. So, I just wanted to ask regarding extraction of raw materials that these brands or these so-called brands like Gucci or any brand in the world particularly uses in creation of their goods or designs. Does fashion law also cover those aspects, or is a completely distinct area of law? And I understand that other areas of law can apply when you are like drafting of contracts, employment law, maybe as a fashion lawyer and something like that. So my question does basically asks that is basically like does fashion law particularly cover that area of law that's to the extraction of, let's take for example diamonds, leather and all sorts, or a particular cotton that a particular company or brand uses for its goods. So is it fashion lawyers that are also responsible for the type of contract that would reproduce something like that? I don't know if you understand my question.
All right, thank you for your question. I think your question is quite clear. After your question is answered, we'll take Phoebe's question and, just take one more and then we'll call it a close. So please, I think I would like to do some kind of assignment of the question. I don't know if Miss Liz got the question. I don't know if you would like to, Miss Liz, I don't know if you would like to share some thoughts on based off of the question that Babatunde asked.
Yeah, sure. But I was thinking maybe we just take all the questions and then now we answer them.
Oh, all
It
right,
might be,
no problem.
yeah.
All right. So Phoebe, please, you can also go ahead and ask your question.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Dennis. Okay, thank you so much for your sessions, Miss Bernice and Miss Liz. Okay, so I just want to know, in summary or however you could put it, but I would like to know the intersection of trade secrets and fashion law. I mean, definitely it makes a lot of sense on the face of it, but I don't know. I just want to have maybe, especially coming from an experiential point of view, because I think on the face of it, it's easy to think, oh, I can see these clothes, I can see the design. So I just want to know what exactly the trade secret aspect would be. And this aspect particularly for Miss Liz, because here in Nigeria, we do not really have a legal framework for trade secrets, except you decide to do your own NDAs or non-competes. The law doesn't really give you a statutory backing of any kind. So I want to know if Kenya has even if there's no statutes, if there's a framework for trade secrets protection beyond what individuals do, and if so, how that plays out in the fashion law or fashion industry. Thank you.
All right. So those are both questions from two mentees. Do we have any other person with a question that we would like to ask? Okay. For courage, based off of your questions, yes, we'll be sending you over the mentors presentation so that you can also go through them, right? As well as the ones that were presented in class today, right? So that you can have access to those materials. So over back to Miss Liz. Would you like to take the floor for the questions, ma'am?
All right. I can take the question. I think we can share with Bernice. Bernice can touch the first question because she also had talked about it in her presentation. And then maybe I can elaborate any further. And then I can take the second question on the intersection of trade secrets and fashion. So basically, there are certain nuances that are proprietary knowledge or information that are not, don't fall under the general IP protection or even the sui generis protections, right? And some of these can include techniques in the fashion space. It might be how to finish a stitch, how to even cure a fabric. So there are certain things that you find some designers who are really innovative and out of the box. Some of them, by virtue of even just having studied abroad, they tend to learn some things, they pick some things and they bring them back home and they're able to employ that, right? And then, of course, as you're working with other people, if it's the tailors, if it's a seamstress or whatever, you find that there would always be a lot of knowledge exchange. And that's why even when you're interrogating or discussing with a fashion client, especially one who is the designer themselves, you want to ask them, what will you do different, or what are you going to be doing different as a designer, so that then you start isolating some of the IP or proprietary information that they may have. The clients I've worked with, I have seen some stitching techniques, fabric manipulation techniques that they either came up with or they saw something and then they just changed a few things. And that sets them apart from other designers, right? So then you want to help this client protect themselves from, from this tailor they're working with, venturing out on their own, and then copying these techniques or sharing this information with a competing designer or brand. So there we found these trade secret agreements become very important. And again, we are also very what's the word? Because you see, trade secrets is an issue about tactfulness, right? When you look at the Coca-Cola example, as an example, this is a company that's been in place for many years, never registered a patent, but to date the formula of Coca-Cola is unknown. Yet, how many people have worked for Coca-Cola since the 1920s or whatever, right? We're talking of thousands. So it's literally an issue of processes. So again, some of these processes around trade secret protection become really important, and they are industry nuanced, and there is no black and white to it. That's why I said this also calls a lot for creative lawyering, because once a client lets you into their world, your job is to start seeing all the potential devils, evils, and walk ahead of those issues. So like when you look at Coca-Cola, for example, they realize that people will start copying, their formula or attempt, because yes, they'll use the cola fruit, there'll be some element of hydrogen for the fizz and whatnot. But you see, they became clever in such a way that they have employed testers. These are humans who they have trained their tongue to know this is a Coca-Cola that's meant for Mexico and not for America. And the Coca-Cola for Mexico probably is also available in Africa, in Kenya, maybe Nigeria and whatever, So they have things like that. They have strategies like where two Coca-Cola employees can never be on the same plane traveling together or be in same spaces, especially internationally. So you'll find that such nuances are employed, and they're not by law, right? It's all about that creative lawyering and business mind and anticipation of any, bad manners, for lack of a better phrase, right? So it means talking ahead. Again, something else that I have realized that is a trade secret is the suppliers. You will find that some designers have really worked hard to find very unique suppliers. They might either be local or international, and there's something about that. So again, that is something you want to put in an agreement that you protect as a trade secret, that you protect yourself, that when this employee leaves, if this tailor leaves or this receptionist leaves, that you're protected by having those non-compete clauses and non-circumvention clauses and all that, which are things that designers always take for granted, right? Again, we're just talking about this. It reminds me of another experience I had with a client who hired her relative to be her receptionist / office manager at her shop, and she never gave her a contract. And she said, what's the worst they can do? This is my first cousin. And shock on her. This lady, she would even start taking the rejected designs and started selling them on Instagram. So eventually she even started her own design, behind her back. And eventually when she realized, because she had a few, very committed customers, they were like, oh, chick, I saw this design, or I bought this design, I thought it was you, but the finishing was looking different. But it's like, oh my gosh, that was a prototype kind of thing. So now she had to eventually fire her. Well, like, at this rate, you've already lost so much. I don't think we can rehabilitate this person because your IP is at jeopardy. So, things like that. So I think that's what I'd say about trade secrets. In Kenya, we don't have any legislative framework around trade secrets. We also just rely on common law. So it just means that we are constantly reading on the trends around trade secrets, and what are other brands doing out there, and what opportunities or conversations that are happening globally. And then with that kind of exposure, you're able to think outside the box. Again, I realized that a lot of these case laws also give us cheat sheet, especially when you investigate and read through the jurisprudence, you read the judgments, what the judge has sort of interrogated based on the different submissions by the counsels, and you're able to find little tidbits that you are able to use and say, in this case, this happened, and the judge said something like, if this was to happen, then this would have been the case, this would have been a likelihood of success. You pick that, and you're able to sort of employ that to help a client. So you find that with trade secrets, it's literally about, being out there in terms of research and reading material and just experiencing the industry. Again, for us lawyers, we can't learn a lot, especially in the IP and entertainment spaces, if we are just always by ourselves. It means you have to go for these fashion events if you want to be in the fashion law space. Get access to backstage and just see all that humdrum that happens in the backstage, from the designers trying to find pins and whatever. Like, you will learn a lot in that space, in those spaces. If there's any shows that are coming up and you want access to the behind the scenes towards when they're preparing for the event, you want to be there, because also you'll only see some of these emerging legal issues when you're there, right? And for me, that is the advantage I had that helped me create this niche in fashion, because I used to model. So I interacted with designers. I could see the challenges they were having from a business level, from an IP perspective and a legal perspective. And then also as a model, even, believe it or not, even for me, it used to be hard sometimes to defend myself, right? There's a job I did many years back when I was in uni. When you in the modeling space, there's what we call a pitch job shoot. A pitch job shoot is basically where a client has already approved a certain concept for an advertisement, but now they want a mock-up. You see, a mock-up will entail now the models actually coming and taking the pictures, enacting the advert and everything. And you're supposed to be paid for that job, right? And what happened is this agency said, here is a copy of the contract. We were only given one contract, so we never had them in duplicate. And then they said, oh, we'll go to the back end and photocopy. And they left. And we never saw those photocopies ever. And it was very hard to claim that we had done this pitch job shoot. And that's how I lost money. And I refused to go up country with my mother to visit my grandmother, because I was going to be a model on some ad. So those things are things now you learn slowly, and you're like, okay, when you're prepping a client, these are the things. So I greatly advise you to always also be out there and be in these spaces where you want to practice. So I'll hand over now to Bernice to answer the question on extraction and raw materials.
Oh wow, to be honest, I was carried away listening to you. You tell the story. I feel like fashion lawyers, we have very similar stories. Just to add to what you said, trade secret, I understand registration of IP from like three categorizations, right? Or four rather. Because one thing that I know for sure is that we are always dealing with certain things, so certain rights that are not even, I don't use the word registrable, but when you're dealing with brands, a lot of things come up and you have to be able to separate each right and identify. But sometimes they might come with something that is not necessarily registrable, but again is a misrepresentation or something that pertains to their brand. So if you want to understand the types of IP particularly, maybe you shouldn't group it into copyright, industrial design, and whatever. You should look at IP types as rights that are registrable. That's the one that you get from registrations. Then the ones that you get automatically without any registration. Then also the one that you get because you have a contract in place. And then ones that arise from market competition. An example of that is maybe like domain. A lot of brands have, people using their domain, and we just twerk one number, or we put .com or .org or things like that. So if you want to really understand the types of intellectual property, maybe you should group it like that. And then you would see that trade secret falls under what you get from a contract. So there's really no, legal framework. You just have to protect it through intellectual property strategy. And that is, again, you understanding the business, because you would not even know how to identify trade secret without understanding the business, like Lisa said. I see that sometimes even on TikTok, a lot of brands would be selling their manufacturer's number, selling different things that should be of assets to them. And it's quite sad, but that shows you that they have or they lack the ability to identify what really falls under IP for their brand or IP assets. But that said, I know that the person mentioned something about resource sourcing and extractive law. So basically, we are seeing that fashion is, like I mentioned before, the African fashion market, what we contribute is our raw materials. We have a lot of raw materials that we export. Although sad, because when you export your raw materials, you're exporting the jobs, you're exporting the opportunities that can be created on the continent. However, if you're going to be working with brands that will be starting from scratch. So, you know that I mentioned also that there is a value chain. And then when you think about the value chain doesn't even start from, the value chain starts from when you think about the product. However, when you move from the ideation to now thinking of sourcing the raw materials, so when you're working with farmers, for example, if you're in the sustainable space, you see that a lot of times people are sourcing for banana fibers, leathers, things like that. Of course, you would have to draft contracts. There are certain certifications that even exist, right, that certify that you are either transparent or your practice are sustainable, even when you're working with. And remember also, I mentioned that fashion is not also fabrics. You have to think about it in relation to jewelries, for example. I definitely know that there's a lot of mining that happen. You see a lot of top brands that make jewelries, right? And they have to also extract that. A lot of them would have to get certifications for those things. And certifications, I'm talking about Kimberly certification. There are other ones like that that you have to have, right? So it's important that you understand those aspects, because if you are going to be representing brands that want to source 100%, but there's a thing about now about brands who source all of their raw materials from Africa, and they're not importing anything. So if you're going to be representing those brands, you have to know about these certifications. You have to know about their sustainability exposures, because we have a very up-to-date law on environmental sustainability in Nigeria. And obviously, you have to advise your clients on those things and the implication of those things. So, yeah, those are like the areas that I know that you have to pay attention to. Now, whether you will call that fashion law, I group it as fashion law, because if I'm representing a brand in that region that is into accessories, leather, things like that, of course, I'll call it fashion law. So the truth about it is that why we identify as a fashion lawyer is for representation of the industry. The fashion industry lacks representation when it comes to legal players, right? A lot of these industries that I'm mentioning, other lawyers already play there, but they do not come through the fashion textile angle. They most likely come through oil and gas or energy, right? But for us, we've said that, oh, we've seen this particular industry and want to be identified as fashion lawyers, right? And that's why it looks like, oh, that's fashion law. But somebody else can, come under energy and oil and gas and mention that that's a different area. But again, I do not represent oil and gas clients. I only represent clients who are, dealing with textile manufacturing and things like that. Then after you move, I mentioned also that there is local content, right? So they might not even play in the aspect of extraction. They might play in the part where they have to get certified to produce safety garments for people who are in extraction. And there's a law, that governs such licensing process. So as a lawyer, you're there. So whether or not you're a fashion lawyer or you call yourself a lawyer in the creative economy or anything that you want to identify as long as you're there, right, you're playing the work of a fashion lawyer, depending on who you represent, basically. I hope that really answers your question.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Bennis, for helping us, Miss Bennis and Miss Liz, for helping us trash those questions, and also for everything that you both shared in today's session. We really sincerely do appreciate. All right. And just before we go, like it's within our practice, please, we'd like to take a quick screenshot of today's class. Sorry, my network has not been so good, so I had to turn off my video, but would like to take pictures. So please, for those who have lighting in their background, can we kindly turn on our videos so that we can take a quick screenshot of today's class? Thank you so much, Miss Liz. Can we have more mentees turn on their videos? We really love to see you, right? We really love to see you. Can we have more mentees turn on their videos?
As they're turning on their cameras, let me just add something to that question. When it comes to issues of sourcing, extraction, and whatnot, already in some countries in Africa, we are lagging behind in terms of the geographical indications, legislations. So that's an area where we can think about improving on for those who don't have the GI. Like in Kenya, we don't have GI. However, we've seen how the GI legislation and regime has helped countries like South Africa, such that now if anyone would use anything rooibos, they will credit South Africa, and South Africa will make some money, and the relevant association, because they have a certain association around rooibos also that will get some money around that. And it's something that they negotiated quietly when they realized that some commercialization was already happening. Again, when you find yourself in a situation where you have a client who is in need of some of these services and you may not be, proper equipped, especially when it's to an extent where it's intensive in terms of extraction law. I always tell Kenyan lawyers, the pie is too big for us to eat alone. So where you have no competence, bring in other lawyers who have that area of competence and learn to share the pie, learn to work together and make money together. Don't just sit there and purport to be the Jack or Jill of all trades or everything law and that you understand. You will be misleading a client. Bring on Bernice and say, hey, Bernice, there's this brief that has come and there's this element I don't understand. And I know this is your area of specialization. How can we work together? This is what the client is bringing on the table. Let's share. Again, transparency. I think we really need to change how we work as lawyers as well. We need to be better people and better, more honest, even with each other. Because there will be instances where I have been in situations where a fellow lawyer wants to rip off my knowledge, stuff I work for day and night, and they will get paid by a client and expect me to do it for free. Is that fair? So let's learn how to eat together and share the pie. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I think that I would
Okay,
also
Ms.
add that, I think it's also building community and having lawyers that are around you that also want to build, because I think that another mistake we make is we think that every lawyer should be on our radar. We should be able to call everybody. But if you work together to build certain lawyers around you, for me, I have a lot of lawyers, right? I mean, I can mention a couple of them that are maybe in entertainment, and for every time they have a fashion brief, they're like, oh, let Benny's handle it. And when I have an entertainment brief and I'm not up to it, because to be honest, I feel like if you focus on fashion, you'll be so tired that you don't want to take anything other than that. So sometimes I'm like, oh, you have to take it. But what I'm really saying is you have to build a community of lawyers that you trust. Because sometimes I see that people also outsource briefs to people that they do not exactly can vouch for their work, and they end up being stranded. So I think as you're growing, you should just start building lawyers, a community of lawyers, basically, of friends that you know that when you give them work, they can deliver, and you can constantly always reach out, and you guys trust each other. But again, giving it to somebody outside of your circle, you definitely know that you're going to be risking, because you're putting yourself on the line to because I mean, if you make a recommendation, the client will be taking up that lawyer because of you. And then when they don't deliver, it's almost looking like you were the one who made that connection. So you should just really be careful. Always learn to network with lawyers, and also, build relationship that you know that it is built on trust, basically.
All right, thank you to both of our mentors for their shared thoughts in today's class. I think while we were both speaking, we had a few people turn on their videos and we were able to take, I was able to take a few pictures. So thank you once again for your time and shared knowledge once again. All right, please, for the mentees that are still on the call, we would like to encourage you, right, to also share what you have learned in today's class on your different social media platforms. Do not forget to tag our mentors, Miss Liz and Miss Benis, right, to show that you have actually learned something for them today. Right, we look forward to also having them in subsequent sessions, share their knowledge and their areas of expertise as they also grow and learn. Right, I also encourage mentees to also take what we are doing serious. This is an avenue for us to not just research, but also an avenue for us to grow and increase in our knowledge as lawyers, both professional lawyers and lawyers that are still coming up within school and on an academic level. Right. So with that, we've come to the end of today's class. We have discussed fashion, business, and law. Right. The topics or the discussions will be going on for us from here henceforth. Please, like I said, do not forget to post what you have learned, tag our mentors. Let the discussion go beyond just what has been said within class today. Good night, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Yeah.